Ladies and gentlemen, a very good evening. You're watching the News Night and I'm Deepthi Sachdeva. This is a story that continues to get bigger by the moment. The story is far bigger because the story now is expanding. You have fresh missiles that have been fired from Iran, and this is no random strike, let me tell you. We'll put up pictures and more details of where we have seen these strikes taking place. So this now has become a kill for a kill. You're hearing that absolutely right. It is kill for a kill, and Iran is not just retaliating right now. It is actually matching Israel blow for blow. That is what it has come down to. In the pitch of the night, in those dark skies, all that you will see is that there are missiles firing all around. There are cluster bombs and penetrating the airspace, sustaining the damage and pushing back very, very hard. So is the West also underestimating Iran's firepower and its friends perhaps? Because these are important things that you must think about. Iran's firepower and Iran's friends. The story is moving fast because you have different world capitals looking at what's going on. Trump, where is Trump? Because behind this entire battlefield, you have Russia and China who are clearly now in Iran's corner. And they have said this openly. The US is backing Israel, but where is America right now? Where is Donald Trump right now? Trump, remember, is already talking of a regime change. He speaks about this. He also says that I know where the supreme commander is. But so far, there is no action. There is no strike. And clearly, there is no shift. So what is getting very clear tonight is that Iran versus Israel. This is no longer just one-sided. It is not just Israel pounding Iran very hard. It is also the other way around. So I call this the I versus the I war. I is Iran, the other I is Israel, and it is right here. It's in our face. It is escalating very, very fast. My team tells me we will be able to give you more breaking updates right away as the story is developing. There is action. There are a lot of responses also coming in. And also, let's get you details of what we've heard from Netanyahu. The Prime Minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu, earlier was at an IDF intelligence base. Those are his pictures on your screens. And from here, he says that I'm here at the IDF intelligence base with the head of the IDF intelligence and our amazing people, the soldiers. And he goes on, in fact, to boost their morale. And he does say that this is the team that knows how to win wars. He's the same man who's spoken, remembered about the assassination, about the regime change. So that is your first big breaking update on the story that Netanyahu is well in command and he says we are here to win a war. Let's bring up our next breaking update as far as the story is concerned, and this is about China. China, the dragon. Now, interestingly, in this conversation, if you're wondering where is China in the Iran-Israel conflict, now China, in fact, has come forward to say that we must have a de-escalation. It also says that if the Middle East is unstable, the world will not be at peace. That is China saying this. But how does China really see this entire crisis? Where is the Chinese hand here? Is there a hidden Russian hand? All these are important details, I think, that we must keep our eyes on. But for the moment, Israel saying we are here to win the war and China saying we should de-escalate. And in the middle of all this, you have missiles that are still being fired. Before we move ahead, let's tell you 5 important war updates that you must know on the story. Something that has happened in the last few hours that our team is bringing to you here. And the first one is going to be up on your screens any moment now. And this is an interesting image that has been shared by the IDF. Now, they say that 60 plus Israeli fighter jets earlier have struck dozens of military targets in Iran. Everything is monitored. Everything is done with precision. They identify the targets. They go out after it. Let's bring the second important war update right now. Dramatic images, very, very disturbing. But this is telling you more about the latest wave of the Iranian missiles. At least 17 Israelis have been injured. Just look at the condition of this building also on your screens. Just one of the many, many pictures that again should raise a lot of alarm bells. This brings us to our third important war update now that's going to go up on your screens. Again, you saw that moment of that explosion. Iran has struck the occupied Bir al-Sabi. And Iran, in fact, many people are saying, has made a change in the kind of weapons it is using, in the kind of technology it is using, and that is the reason why it's able to even penetrate the Iron Dome, and that is the exact moment of explosion that was captured on the cameras. Let's bring up our fourth important war update, and this is again significant. Now, the IAF also maintains aerial superiority in the Iranian airspace. You do know this is a battle not just being fought on the ground, even from the air. You're looking at a lot of these images that will come to us, images that will tell us the impact of this strike. You have ballistic missiles, you have cruise missiles, and now there is a lot of chatter about cluster bombs which are otherwise banned, that has been used by Iran. What really are these bombs? I'm going to tell you that on the show in just a moment. But let's also play out the fifth important war update. This is about Donald Trump. Where is Donald Trump? People say he's sitting and watching what's going on. And he says the decision on the US involvement is expected in the next 2 weeks. But this does not mean that Donald Trump, remember, is going to be waiting exactly for 2 weeks. There could be a decision and there could be some action sooner than that. So Donald Trump right now not taking a call on what he needs to do. But remember, there is already a lot of movement of weapons, of warships, of aircraft carriers. Again, something that I'm going to tell you a little later on the show. And also very, very important for you to remember that as we speak and as this time closes in, there is no de-escalation as far as both Iran and Israel are concerned. Right now, what we've done is we've just turned into this graphic animation for you to help understand what are cluster bombs. Because for the very first time, there is this chatter, and Israel has said that cluster bombs have been used by Iran. What really are these? Now, on my left, you see this entire warhead going down. In fact, it'll be on my right, as you will see here on the screens. You will see that entire warhead going down. And this warhead, when it goes down, it carries a lot of these small bombs. These small bombs will drop like bomblets. They fall down. All of them, remember, do not blast. They just scatter in the air. But look at the kind of impact in a huge area. Now, this is Israel, over which you see this entire warhead coming down, these munitions falling. These are called cluster bombs. How do they work? On your screens, you're reading these details. They could explode midair. They scatter the bomblets over that wide area. Let's keep those details coming in faster for you to understand how does this really operate, what are the concerns as far as this is concerned. This can cover an area as large as a football field. So that is the kind of impact, remember, that this particular warhead can actually make. It can hit troops, it can hit vehicles, it can hit infrastructure. So almost anything that really comes under its radar can actually be destroyed. It is just one bomb, but dozens of deadly impacts. It keeps breaking into more bomblets and it keeps falling down, and many bomblets fail to explode. This is another danger, because when they fail to explode, what could be the threat? That is what I'm showing you on our screens right now. When they will float in the air, they will come and fall down somewhere. The war zones become minefields for years. For years together, you can have these bomblets just being kept somewhere on the ground, and the moment you hit on it or you have some heavy object on it, it can explode. Now, there has been a global ban and exceptions. That's what I'm going to tell you exactly now. 120 nations together have signed a ban that happened in the year 2008 about the cluster bombs. But look at the countries who are not a part of it, whether it is US, whether it is Russia, China, not on the list, and clearly not Iran and Israel also. Israel today has made a big charge, and they say Iran has used this against us. In the 2025 strike in Ukraine, Russia, the charge was that Russia has also used this cluster bomb, and this has also led to fatalities and 11 people losing their lives, 40 injured. There has been a lot of global outrage, but in spite of that, the way you see it falling, these cluster bombs are still being used. It is banned exactly because of this lethal weapon, and is it still being used by Iran is a question that many would say merits an answer right now. On your screens is a better imagery to tell you how exactly this falls on a wide area, and then it creates that loud explosion, and this is where the real problem will begin. All right, so what you just saw is a full graphic explanation to help you understand what are cluster bombs. But remember, why is this story a cluster bomb versus the Iron Dome? Now, on your screens are more images of how really does this Iron Dome operate. These little balls of fire that you see there on your screens are actually missiles, a lot of them being repelled by the Israeli Iron Dome. You see the missile coming and suddenly there is a loud thud, it is repelled, and this is how Israel, with the best of its technology that is called the Iron Dome, is actually right now using in this escalation versus Iran. But like we've been discussing here on Newsnight, that there has been a tremendous pressure, there is a saturation, and that is why there are also moments where you will see this Iron Dome that begins to leak. And this is where those missiles that are being sent by Iran are able to actually breach that airspace. They enter inside, they hit targets, they enter civilians, they've hit at hospitals, and that is also why you have Netanyahu who said that something like this will not be tolerated. There will be costs behind this entire escalation by Iran. And joining us right now to just decode this and what is Trump thinking, what is the Pentagon thinking, is someone very, very important. I want to introduce to you Michael Rubin, who's in fact, remember, a former Pentagon official. He's also a senior fellow at the American Enterprise Institute. Michael, thank you so much for your time. It's a big day. It's a story developing very fast and in real time. And people want to know, Rubin, whether Trump, his many flip-flops, is also responsible for what's going on. Is Trump really the peacemaker here, as he wants us to believe, or he's someone lighting the match?
Well, Donald Trump, first of all, didn't say he would wait 2 weeks. He would say he would wait up to 2 weeks. And so in reality, an American response could come at any time. I think Donald Trump is serious about giving Iran an off-ramp, a time to accept diplomacy. But he's also serious saying the nuclear program will end. I don't think Donald Trump is lighting the match at this point. I think he's basically saying this conflict has a time limit on it. It's going to end, and it's not going to end in Iran's favor.
Okay, you say this is not going to end in Iran's favor, and clearly that's a signal that America has been giving, Michael. But tell me something, regime change and an assassination, this is what you've heard from America, maybe in whispers, and this is also what you've heard from Benjamin Netanyahu for the last very many days. Now, is this posturing, or this could be a real scenario, Michael?
I think increasingly this is a real possibility. There were two missions for Israel. First was getting rid of Iran's nuclear program. To succeed in that, it demands taking out Ferdo, the underground nuclear facility. Israel might need America's help on that. The other issue, and we've seen this with the targeting of the National Police Headquarters, of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps Surveillance Center, is eliminating all the means of suppression which could prevent the Iranian people from rising up. And certainly, Netanyahu seems to be going in that direction, believing that it's not Iran with a nuclear weapon alone which is the threat, it's the specific regime he faces. He also worries that if the regime is allowed to survive, the Chinese, the Russians, the Pakistanis, maybe the Turks, would help Iran reconstitute its program. So there's a belief that not only the program needs to go, but the regime itself.
All right, you mentioned that important point, and I think our viewers would be interested to also know that how far can you see America going? How far would Israel go? And what about Iran? And are we underestimating Iran, Michael? These are important points that I'm going to just discuss with you in a moment, and I'm requesting you to please stay with us as we will also move forward now to look at Ferdo. Now, this, remember, again, is one of the nuke sites. And in the conversations, you must have heard this, that in case you want to ensure that Iran is hit, you have to hit at Ferdo. But how do you do this? It's a nuclear site. It is penetrated deep inside the ground. So let's bring up those graphics and the animation to help you understand how this can be done. Now you look at this machine. It's a huge machine. This only belongs to the US. It's called the B-2 stealth bomber. It is a bomber. It's called the B-2 stealth bomber, a huge machine. Look at the entire design. And this only and only is what the US has, the United States of America. You need this in case you need to hit at Ferdo. But what is special about this? Now, this is America's deadliest bomber, one of the most powerful machines that it has. What it can do, we will keep changing this to get you more updates on this. Now, there is a reduced radar signature again there, to ensure that it is not captured in the enemy's radar. Because remember, if the enemy's radars are able to capture this, it can be shot down. And that is the reason why it has a lot of modifications on its body. How will it move? Now, this is the GBU-5 bomb that, again, we have discussed here on Newsnight. You will see the stealth bomber that is configured strongly enough for you to ensure that this drops from here. And this is when it drops this particular warhead, and this is the bunker buster bomb that we are speaking about. This is called the GBU-57. This is carried in the stealth bomber, and then it begins to move. It is a precision guided bunker buster bomb, the only thing that can go deep inside bunkers, bunkers that are fortified, bunkers right now that are there in Iran and in Israel, also for safety purposes, also for the nukes. The weight of this, if you're wondering, it's a huge machine. The weight is close to about 30,000 pounds. That is the kind of material, the weight it really carries. The length of this is about 20 feet long. This is the GBU that can, again, to drop this, to carry this, you need the US's B-52 stealth bomber only. This is the only machine that is configured with this. And if you look at the entire width of this, close to about 31.5 inches. And we realize that there is a lot of interest to understand how these machines work. So here it moves, and it will drop this from here. It changes its position, and it is made from a high performance steel alloy. And that is how it is able to sustain a lot of this weight, a lot of this pressure, a lot of this thrust. And this is where it begins to penetrate deep inside the ground. When it goes here, this is the bunker. It penetrates up to 200 feet. Think about this, how deep it can go. 200 feet, that is about 61 meters of reinforced concrete. And then is where you not just have a bunker. The thing is that even the Ferdo nuclear site is deep inside. It is buried deep. And this is why you need this to be able to destroy those bunkers, those tunnels that today fortify a lot of sites, particularly the nuke sites in Iran. Is this going to be used or not? We do not know. But like I said, it is only the United States of America that has this. And more interesting details about this GBU-5 is that there is a GPS, there is an inertial navigation system, all that helps you to track this machine in real time. Something that America is capable of doing. But can it really do this? We do not know, but I'll tell you two more important details. It can carry more than 2,267 kilograms of explosives. The numbers are huge, they are staggering. And the cost of the bomb is, remember, approximately about 29 crores. 29 crores is the cost of this. Will we see America using this? We do not know, but I want to go back to Michael with this particular question. Michael, we've just talked about the cluster bombs. We've spoken about what's been happening as far as the Ayatollah regime is concerned. Is there going to be a regime change and much more? You think that is a possibility? And what is this conversation about the cluster bombs that Iran has essentially used against Israel?
Well, your question is right on. You're absolutely right. But there have been successful regime change before. We've seen this after World War II with Germany and Japan. We saw this when the Khmer Rouge was ousted by Vietnam in 1979, and we saw this with the ouster of Idi Amin in Uganda as well. The question is whether Iran maintaining a nuclear capability is in the interests of the region and whether the regime itself is destabilizing. That said, you're not going to get a democracy in Iran right away. The Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps has too many resources. And so the question is whether it's going to become a military dictatorship which can continue control, or whether it's going to be an ideological dictatorship, which might be a problem. When you have Khamenei saying, under no condition are we going to surrender, I don't take that into account. Because in 1988, Ayatollah Khomeini said, under no circumstances are we going to agree to a ceasefire with Iraq. It's off the table, don't even ask. Then on July 21st, 1988, he got on the radio and he said, it's like drinking from a chalice of poison, but I have no choice but to drink from this cup if I want the Islamic Republic to survive. Right now, Khamenei's got to be given a choice. Is the Islamic Republic going to survive, or is it going to give up its nuclear program? It can't have both.
All right, I think what you say, and because you're a former Pentagon official, this is significant because you think that this is actually possible. The other question that people have been asking, Michael, whether it's possible or not, is whether you can see a strike by the US on Ferdo. Is that possible? Is that a reality? That can happen?
The short answer is yes, Ferdo can be hit. The American B-2 bomber with a 30,000-pound conventional bunker buster bomb is what's able to do it. Israel doesn't have that capability. The United States does. The advantage here is that Ferdo isn't located in a civilian area, and so you don't have to worry about collateral damage. What many Iranians, by the way, are pointing out now is by the regime's official statistics, perhaps 250 or 300 civilians have been killed in this strike. Now, the strike has gone on for a week. During the Woman Life Freedom movement, more than 1,000 people were killed by the Iranians. Same thing in 2019 with regard to the gas price hike protests. The fact of the matter is, many Iranians are pointing out that they're safer with the Israelis bombing Iran than with the Iranian regime itself trying to reestablish control.
Okay, so you believe again that hitting Ferdo could be a real possibility, and obviously that can be done with the stealth bomber and the GBU-57 that we just spoke about, Michael. Again, I'm going to be requesting you to stay with us as I move on to tell our viewers the next bit of the story. And this is also about the weapons. Remember the weapons, the artillery, the machines, the carriers, the big machines that the US has that has been already set into motion. And this is again something that gives you an idea of war preparedness. On our screens now are those details that will come one by one. We'll talk about all these machines. This is the F-22 Raptor Stealth Air Superiority Fighter. Now this is when Donald Trump decides to pull the trigger, and these are US weapons that can be used against Iran, and he can obviously say that you must start moving this towards Europe so that it becomes closer to where we need to strike. The other important machine is the B-2 Spirit stealth bomber. If you look at them, again, these are all very, very powerful machines with configurations that can hold enough number of personnel, enough number of weapons, they can strike at will. Let's bring up the next important detail also on the aircraft. This is the FA-18 Super Hornet. Again, very important details, interesting ones, but all these are already on the move as we speak. Something that gives an indication of a lot of movement already happening in case it comes to that. The other important aircraft that possibly could also be moved is the F-15 Strike Eagle. All of them come with different precision where you need to strike particular targets, and they are all, remember, under the radar, all have GPS monitors and a lot of other things. They're able to pick up a lot of imagery and strike at targets identified. This brings us to our next important detail again. This is about missiles and drones. So we showed you aircraft. Now we'll go down to missiles and drones. This is the Tomahawk land attack cruise missile. Missiles, again, very powerful. They are able to hit and they are able to be fired from a longer distance. Many, many kilometers is what could be used. And do remember all these drones. This is the AGM-158 JASSM stealth cruise missile. A lot of them are also parked in the many air bases that US has around Iran. A lot of those are functional bases that already have been in play for the last many, many years and could be used in terms of an eventuality. This brings us to our next important detail that you will see again on missiles and drones. This is the AGM-114 Hellfire missile. So multiple missiles, names are different, but all these are to be used again in extreme circumstances in case you have to provide power to Israel to fight this war against Iran. The other one interesting that we are talking about is the MQ-9 Reaper drone. This again is a combination of a lot of machines, as you see in the structure, which carries a drone. It's able to move quickly and it also is able to hit the target pretty well, is what its record says. Now are the warships. Warships, because we've discussed what could happen as far as the skies are concerned. This is the USS Gerald R. Ford aircraft carrier. If you look at these images, these are carriers because on top of them you can see a lot of these aircrafts parked. So this is how you will be able to move them. A lot of them also have refueling facilities for longer hauls and to be able to ensure that they continue to remain airborne. This is the very, very famous USS Nimitz aircraft carrier, a huge machine. It can have a lot of their personnel already on board. And again, if you notice in this image, you will see all these aircrafts, the refuelers parked on it completely. This already has moved towards Europe, is something again that we know for a fact. The US has not said why that movement has happened. This is the Ticonderoga class guided missile cruiser. Again, this is something that also houses a lot of missiles. Apart from your helicopters, apart from a lot of other equipment that you might need during war times. And Iran, remember, like I said, you have US that has constructed a lot of these bases, the Navy fleet that it already has in particular countries. Now this is a warship. This is the Virginia class attack submarine. Again, if Donald Trump decides to pull the trigger, this could already be on the move and the enemy might not even know that this is coming to attack them. Even as we bring to you this broadcast, we have another quick breaking update right now, and that's going to be flashing on your screens. And this is about more action, more details that we are looking at right now. And what we can tell you is that the Hezbollah commander, apparently responsible for the rocket attacks on northern Israel, has been killed in Lebanon drone strike. This is what the IDF now has said. I'll repeat that again. The Hezbollah commander responsible for the rocket attacks on northern Israel has been neutralized in Lebanon drone strike, is what the IDF says. So a lot of action that is still happening as we speak. You're looking at Israel that already, remember, has eliminated a lot of key commanders. When it comes to Iran and its proxies, Hezbollah is one of its proxies, much like the Houthis. And you're looking at a lot of that action again happening right now. This is the latest breaking update on your screens. And Israel believes that he was someone responsible for the attacks. He was identified, he was tracked for the last few hours. And then you have seen a precision strike that was carried out. And Israel now says we have been able to eliminate the Hezbollah commander there. So clearly a story that continues to escalate by the moment. And I want to see if we can go back to Michael as far as this story is concerned. And also later we'll get you details of the more other commanders from Iran that have been neutralized as far as the strikes are concerned. But Michael, we haven't yet spoken about Russia and China. Many people say that there is a clear and a hidden Russia and China hand also in this conflict. Will you concur?
Certainly, Russia has been helping the Islamic Republic of Iran, including with its nuclear program for some time. Frankly, Pakistan has as well. One of the reasons why Iran's program was referred to the United Nations was because they weren't being clear with the activities of the late Pakistani nuclear scientist A.Q. Khan. China, of course, has an interest because 44% of the fuel which goes out of the Strait of Hormuz ends up in China. And so China has an interest, but China tends to take a more even approach. Russia, despite its rhetoric, is occupied in Ukraine right now. There's a limit to what they can do.
Okay, and now I have to ask you one question about the US, its priorities, the hypocrisy, because on one side you have the US literally quoting Pakistan. You have Donald Trump sitting with Asim Munir, the same man who's responsible for the Pahalgam attack. And India has been able to present enough and many, many evidences, Michael. At this point, can you trust a Donald Trump?
In this case, I don't think Donald Trump can be trusted. One of the problems I have with Donald Trump is that he seems to have this fascination with terrorists and terrorists wearing business suits. We've seen this with the Taliban. We've seen this with meeting Ahmed al-Shara, a former al-Qaeda leader who's now the interim president of Syria. Just because you say you're a reformed al-Qaeda doesn't mean you really are a reformed al-Qaeda. And let's face it, the only difference between Asim Munir and Osama bin Laden is one lived in a cave and the other one lives in a palace. Donald Trump seems to be trading the short-term desire to have some geography from which to work with to oust the Iranian nuclear program with the long-term danger of emboldening Pakistan. This is also where I think India has a role to play, because there is another important reason why Donald Trump might be trying to get Pakistan's buy-in. If Iran surrenders, we're going to need to extricate the nuclear material. There's a big question mark over who is going to do that.
Yes, Michael, I think you're right. There's still a lot of question mark over what is Donald Trump really thinking? What is he going to be doing? And when he says 2 weeks, and you also say that he says still about 2 weeks, so we'll have to find out what he's wanting to do in those 2 weeks, Michael. But just stay with me as we will expand this entire story now and help our viewers understand what could happen in these 2 weeks. When Donald Trump says, and the White House says 2 weeks, what could this entail? We'll bring up those details again on our screens. What can you expect in these 2 weeks of the deadline? Back channel diplomacy activates. US is expected to work via the UAE, Oman and Qatar. But should you be talking to Iran? We do not know, but clearly this tells you that there could be a push to having a conversation with Iran so that it signs that deal. Let's bring up the next important point on what to expect. There could be pressure on Israel to pause. Is this going to be pausing for the moment or for the long haul? We do not know. But Israel likely to hold off the intense attacks. So you could see some kind of lull as far as the escalation of the attacks is concerned. But could this be long term? We do not know. Brings us to our third important point. Iran may signal restraint. So it might pull back for the moment. It might signal restraint. And Tehran then may publicly tone down the rhetoric. But even then, it doesn't solve your problem. Brings us to our fourth important point on what possibly to expect. This is about the proxy groups under the watch. Remember the Hezbollah, the Houthis, and the many other proxies that you have Iran creating to encircle Israel. Now, US and Israel are closely tracking the Hezbollah, the Houthis, the Iraqi militias, only to find out what possibly could they entail. A lot of them, remember, right now are under a lot of stress because a lot of their commanders have also been killed and hit by Israel. What you could also expect is that military posturing could continue. The US naval forces will remain in the region. They will continue to watch the entire story. They will see that Iran stays in its limits, but again, for how long? Brings us to our next important point on what you could expect in these 2 weeks. The oil markets will remain volatile. Oil is an important concern. You have the Strait of Hormuz, and I'm going to tell you also about that graphically in just a moment. But any provocation could send prices surging, again something that no country would want right now, because this clearly could stress their money bags. Brings us to our next important detail. This is Trump seeking a win. Now, knowing Donald Trump, this could happen. He could aim to claim credit for preventing a war. He, remember, continues to make a lot of those false, baseless claims of how he tried to have that ceasefire between India and Pakistan. So we shouldn't be surprised. The Prime Minister has called out his bluff, but he could still be wanting to seek a win when it comes to the situation between Israel and Iran. Brings us to our next important point. Trump, in fact, if he does all this, there is a large risk of a miscalculation, because even one rogue strike could trigger an immediate retaliation. And this again is a risk, but will Donald Trump and the US take responsibility for this? This brings us to our final point, the final outcome. What could that be? If diplomacy works, there could be a temporary calm, but then still, what about the Iranian nuclear program? Something that has been discussed. Will that still continue? Will there be breaks on this? And can you still allow Iran to develop nukes? Important question. And I want to take this back to, again, Michael, who's back with us. Michael, we've discussed a lot of important points. We've spoken about Russia, China, India. Is the US also with Israel? Because we do not know. Is the US and Donald Trump only about their self-interest?
The US today is standing with Israel. Now, there is debate in Washington, but it seems that Donald Trump has decided that the isolationist base is going to be cast aside and that he's going to side with Israel. And this makes sense, because even if some of the isolationist fringe and Donald Trump's base is angry at Israel for having initiated this conflict, a cold, naked calculation about what's in America's interest, chiding Israel or eliminating Iran's nuclear program once and for all, it's an obvious answer. Eliminate Iran's nuclear program.
But tell me something, Michael, why is the US not acting? Why is Donald Trump again quiet? Many would say that, is the US scared only because of Russia and China and, the other allies right now of Iran? Why has the US not gone in and just ensured that there is a ceasefire?
Well, first of all, the United States might be putting some assets in place in order to conduct this operation. That takes time. Number two, the United States is scared about a vacuum developing. This is the reason why Donald Trump doesn't want the Israelis assassinating Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei. What the United States wants is for Ali Khamenei to be forced to sign a surrender. When Khomeini did this in the 1988 Iran-Iraq war, he likened it to drinking from a chalice of poison. But if you have Khomeini actually physically surrendering, then you have the ability to sign off control to some other transitional council and prevent a vacuum from developing.
Okay, so clearly you see a game plan, and that is why maybe Donald Trump has bought this time, is what you think. But let's open this up to tell our viewers more details about why is the US possibly worried. Now, what could be the reasons? We are looking at a lot of oil fields. Oil is a lot of money. Oil is a lot of transaction. And oil obviously is something that is at the nerve also of this conversation. So we bring up a map for you to help you understand that why possibly there could be a threat to the Iranian oil fields. These are the possible effects on the trade routes in case you will see an escalation and in case you will see some bit of action also by the US. Now, this is the Suez Canal, which is the choke point. What is at risk if this gets affected or this gets blocked? About 4.2 million barrels of oil that travels from here per day. Now, this is a Strait of Hormuz. You must have heard about this. In case there is an escalation, this is also what Iran could actually choke. It could get closed. Why is this important? Again, because it's about 17.9 million barrels per day. 17.9 million barrels is what really moves from this. And then you also have the Bab al-Mandab. This is on the other southern end here. The choke point, the risk here is that from here you have about 3.2 million barrels that move essentially per day. And clearly, you have a larger story at hand. You have a lot more countries that will get affected as far as the threat to the Iranian oil fields is concerned. And not just this. The US itself has a lot of interest, as we just heard Michael speaking about. And we'll also look very closely at the Strait of Hormuz, because this is something which possibly will also affect India. Now, where is the Strait of Hormuz? You're looking at the Persian Gulf and the Gulf of Oman. And all these quick carriers that you see moving are those that carry a lot of trade, a lot of bulk, a lot of oil. What happens in case this particular portion gets shut is that clearly they will not just be stranded here, they will have to look for alternate routes, which are very difficult and which might be difficult, also keeping in mind the money involved, the time that could be lost, and a lot of other expenditure. And Iran, will it go on to closing the Strait of Hormuz? No one knows. But this is again a possibility that not just the world, but New Delhi is also looking at very closely. At this point, I want to go back to Michael, and we will in fact take this point ahead also now with him. As you're looking at US with Israel and a lot of other things, Michael, that you have spoken about, but when we began the show, we also discussed about cluster bombs, we discussed about the Iron Dome, and there is a concern that the Iron Dome possibly is also under a lot of pressure. It could be leaking.
Well, first of all, yes. Israel did start to run short on missiles. And what Israel also does is it calculates where different missiles are going to land. If it's going to land in a rural area or in an empty field, they're not going to bother intercepting it. They're going to save their munitions. The United States has now resupplied Israel with many of these interceptors. At the same time, Iran is also running out of missiles. The first barrages that Iran sent on day 1 and 2 of this conflict had between 120 and 150 missiles in each of them. Now the Iranian barrages are down to between 10 and 20 missiles. That's a reflection that Iran is running out of ammunition as well.
Okay, and Michael, before I let you go, this is my final question. As you look at the entire story developing, entire escalation going on, which is the most likely outcome? What could happen?
I think within a week, Ferdo is going to be bombed. I do believe that the regime in Iran is going to collapse. Now, while the collapse of the regime will represent a failure of diplomacy, the war represents a failure of diplomacy. At the same time, it opens new opportunities. After Kuwait was liberated and Saddam Hussein was defeated in 1991, that opened the Madrid conference, in which the Israelis, the Syrians, and the Palestinians sat together for the first time. Could we see, and that led to the Oslo Accords 2 years later. Could we see, with the Iranian government collapsing, with the Islamic Republic collapsing, the opportunity for a Cyrus Accords to join the Abraham Accords? I think that's a real possibility, because while the regime is anti-Israel in Iran, the Iranian people are not. And therefore, there is a host of new opportunities. I am worried about what comes next. And in this case, I worry about an Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps dictatorship. But not everyone in the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps is a theocrat or an ideologue. Some of them simply want to maintain control. Some of them are nationalists. And this is also where India can help identifying who might be the person to take charge.
All right, so that is Michael Rubin, the ultimate Pentagon insider, who's actually made his prediction. He says it'll take a week, but Ferdo will be hit and America will do this. He also says the regime will collapse most likely in Iran. Is that a possibility? We do not know, but that can definitely be a scenario. I'm thanking Michael Rubin for his time, his perspective as always on NDTV. Let's get you this breaking update. This is about Russia and what Russia has to say about the Iran-Israel conflict. The first response, in fact, that is coming in from Vladimir Putin, who's speaking on this entire crisis. And he, remember, for some time has been saying that Russia can be a peacemaker. He's reiterating that claim, and he says that there should be no escalation. Let's quickly listen in to his response.
We are maintaining contact with Israel. I spoke to Prime Minister Netanyahu, and I spoke to the President of Iran, and I spoke to the President of the United States, and they are directly involved in all these processes. So I presented them with our vision about what possible progress we could accomplish regarding this situation. We'll see. Now they are discussing our suggestion as well. We maintain contact almost daily with our Iranian friends, so we'll see. I would really love to see that our ideas, among others, including our ideas, were implemented.
Let's get you our next breaking update. This is also about the Iranian FM. And if you've just heard Putin, he says our Iranian friends. So we know that where does Putin stand? Now, the Iranian FM says we're supposed to meet, but we have not moved ahead as far as this claim is concerned. He says we plan to craft a nuclear program. He says I was supposed to meet the US, but that meeting hasn't happened. Donald Trump, remember, has already said that we must have a meeting. We can have a deal even now. Let's listen into that big claim and what possibly will happen in just a moment. But Iran, for the moment, is not talking of a surrender. It is not talking of a de-escalation. It is just saying that we were supposed to meet with the US, but we were attacked right before the negotiations. This direct attack is also at Netanyahu, who began this attack before even, that time period could finish. And this is the reason why they say that we still plan to craft a nuclear program. So there is no let up as far as this entire response from Iran is concerned. But I want to introduce another special guest who's going to get us more details and his perspective. He's Ambassador Anil Triguniat, who's been a former ambassador to Jordan, Libya. He does understand the region very, very well. Ambassador, thank you so much, sir. Good evening. And you're joining us on NDTV. What is the big picture? When Donald Trump says that in the next 2 weeks we could have a decision, what do you think could happen?
Well, I think this is the worst that the world wanted to avoid has happened now. And there is an absolute necessity to stop this. Otherwise, it can conflagrate into the whole region. That will be worst for the region and for India and for the world. For obvious reasons, I mean, because of energy supplies, because of our expats, and because of overall economic downturn that will happen. And there is no game plan exactly. Regime change becomes the agenda, then it becomes extremely difficult. As far as President Trump is concerned, he obviously, in the beginning, seemed as if he's against the wars, especially the conventional wars. He loves tariff wars, so that's perfectly fine. But in this particular case, his fact that he has taken 2 weeks to finally do that can happen anytime. But I believe that he's waiting for the meeting between Foreign Minister Aragachi of Iran with the Europeans. And apparently there is some discussions also with the Americans exactly how the nuclear deal will go, because that is likely to be the way out and off-ramp for both sides to do that. But let us not forget that then Prime Minister Netanyahu just did it 1 day before the meeting was supposed, sixth round of discussions were supposed to happen between Steve Witkoff and FM Aragachi, when it was estimated that they would have agreed to some kind of a deal, nuclear deal. Both sides wanted that. But today's situation is very extremely difficult, highly volatile, and therefore all countries, especially the major powers, need to take adequate action to defuse it.
Okay, and Ambassador, do you believe that the US is already in this war? It is right there.
And this is also a pressure, and as you know, that the US foreign policy in the Middle East is driven by safety and security of Israel as a state, and not a particular prime minister. So that is something very important. So irrespective of the administrations, they will come to the rescue of Israel when it's today. Israel is also taking a big beating in this whole bargain. And therefore, I believe that the US has been very much a part of this. And going forward, whether they will officially join this will decide the course of how the region proceeds.
Okay, and Ambassador, there have been two scenarios that have been discussed and spoken about: a regime change and an assassination by Israel. How can the world today brace up for these eventualities?
And the world does not brace up. The Western countries have done it forever. Regime change agenda is something that is their favorite pastime. I've seen it from the Arab Spring. We have seen so many of the Iraq invasion, the Libya invasion. So there were umpteen cases ever since they've gone on. If they don't like some regime, they want to change it. But regime change is not an end in itself because it does not serve the purpose that you want to intend. That's what the live examples are there. So I hope they have learned from the history. It is a standard playbook of removing a particular leader, but you don't know what's coming next. And that is something I think they need to understand.
Okay, and earlier today, there have been a lot of these reports of Iran filing a lot of these missiles at Israel. Israel has also said that we will retaliate. There's a conversation about the Iron Dome, about the cluster bombs. How do you see all this panning out?
Well, it's a free for all now. In fact, I don't see that there are any red lines in this or any special areas that they would like to exclude. Both sides have been hitting each other. And you have a lot of these disinformation campaign from both sides, whereby they want to be proving themselves to be better than the other in terms of hitting some people. Some would say that they are not hitting civilians. Others are saying that they have hit only the military targets. But there is no distinction as of today.
Okay, and before I let you go, sir, there is a lot of concern also about the global oil prices, about students, about at least the 9.5 million Indians who are also in that region. How should New Delhi be bracing up for what possibly could happen and a conflict that could continue for the next few days?
You're right, absolutely. In fact, this whole region, in my view, is existential for us. The stability and security is of utmost importance for India for the simple reason, as you mentioned, about 80% of energy coming from there. We have a huge economic engagement, connectivity, both through Iran and proposed through IMEC corridor through Israel, are all at stake. We have, more importantly, we have about 9.5 million Indians in the region, and their safety and security is also of great importance to us and is a major concern. And that's why, in the very beginning, India issued a statement because both the countries are our strategic partners, urging them for restraint, de-escalation, and coming to dialogue. I mean, this is what India has been doing. India has even offered to mediate if they require so. At the same time, our minister has also spoken to both his counterparts. Mr. Netanyahu has spoken to Prime Minister Modi. And as you know, the Prime Minister Modi in Croatia had said very clearly that, that no solution can be found on the battlefield. So this is something that we'll have to watch out how it plays out. India has never shirked from its role of helping out in some kind of a de-escalation.
Oh, yes. And interesting that you speak about India, and many say that India is trusted by both sides. So that is why India could actually play a larger role in the negotiations if it moves towards that. Ambassador, always a pleasure, sir, speaking to you and understanding the perspective. I thank you only for want of time. And with this, it's also time for us to close things in this edition of the News Night, but only with a promise that NDTV will always keep you on top of the story that matters. Where is this Iran versus Israel conflict going? And how does this impact your life? Thank you for watching. Good night.